What would be, I guess, the best advice you could give somebody in terms of, let's say, first on raising money? Like someone comes to you, like what are the most common mistakes?
So on raising money, the thing which kills me every time is that people sort of don't even do their homework, researching who does what and why they should go to Chris Dixon or Founder Collective, why they should go to Jeff Clavier and SoftTech, why they should go to another investor based on the profile of investment, the style of investment. And, I think I've been pretty vocal, open about what I do. And every now and then I still get emails from people saying, do you do any consumer investing? So it's a matter of figuring out the landscape of investors.
Which is a simple matter of going to your website and it's not.
Google.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm Jeff on Twitter.
I think that's probably a good rule of thumb in general whenever you're going to a meeting, right? To Google them first.
Know who you're meeting, know what their preferences. Typically, it will be sort of pretty clear, both from what they've invested in and what they talk about. You can sort of get a hint on that and really sort of figure out who the top 10 people are, figure out how you're going to get to them through someone you know. So it's the whole sort of referral game, which is so important. Because the one thing people have to understand is they're not the only entrepreneur trying to get money from us. There's 20 of them reaching out to us every day. And so if they don't do the minimum, which is find someone who we trust.
Probably the best way is through a CEO of a founder of your portfolio company, right? I mean, those are, I think.
Founder is definitely a strong signal.
Yeah.
Another co-investor.
Also, founders tend to be kind of more sympathetic to other entrepreneurs. So it's like it's a reasonable sort of approach, I think, to take.
But, I think figure out people who have a certain legitimacy with the investor is sort of the most important. And so, if my lawyer sends me a deal, I will definitely listen to it because he's been working with me for 5 years and he knows what we do. So figuring out in the ecosystem who's the right sort of referral point is super important. It's the difference between being at the top of the funnel and being sort of in, close to deletion, because sometimes you just don't read those emails, right? To whom it may concern. Out.
You get 5,000 of those a day.
Like, did you get that thing? There was an email over the weekend to roughly 250 investors, and I'm not sure how the guy compiled it, but it was in the two, and there was like a Word document. I mean, seriously. So, figuring out the referral, figuring out the go-to list, and then, if you get to pitching people, and roughly there is a, 10 to 20, maybe 30%, success rate there. So getting actually in front of us is pretty hard. Then it's understanding the process. The goal of the first meeting is to get to the second meeting, right? And so pitch the idea. We like to hear stories. So we like founders to tell us how they came up with the idea, what they've done before, why this is a passion of theirs. And the passion for us is something that we need to feel, because it's going to be hard, it's going to be horrible, it's going to be, blood, sweat, and tears for 5-7 years, and you'd better be sort of committed to that. And we try and sort of establish that in the first meetings. And if we feel that this is actually something we're excited about, and for us it's great founders, differentiated product with a genuine sort of market opportunity, meaning if it works, it can create something really interesting, then we'll take them through the process, multiple meetings, reference checks, blah, 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 blah. And at the end, they will be potentially in the 0.5% of people actually get the financing from us.
What would be like just general advice you'd give to entrepreneurs if you had maybe top 3 pieces of advice or something?
So we talked about be very careful in the way you approach your financing and be very precise in who you talk to. I think because we're living in this environment where you have essentially 18 months to prove yourself, it's try and understand this set of milestones pretty well and sort of work backward and really keep that trajectory in mind as you sort of progress. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you need to hire your team, you need to build your product, you need to get the business of your marketing sort of going and so on and so on. And it's easy to sort of get out of the main line, which is I have 18 months, 17 months, 16 months of runway and the clock is ticking. So making sure that you keep an eye on sort of the trajectory you want to have, and make sure that you sync up with your investors or people who have this outside view, who can tell you, look, dude, you're just veering off. This is not relevant. This is not the one thing that you should be focusing on. And to me, this focus of the entrepreneur is really key, because there's just not enough time to do something which is not important. So what I want to hear from my entrepreneurs is, okay, what is what is the path we're going to try and go on over the next 3 months? What are the intermediary steps? This is very process-oriented sometimes, but you really want to keep an eye on how well you're progressing, because unfortunately, you will discover, 3 months before you're about to raise money that you're not ready, and you might have actually been able to fix that 6 months prior if you sort of knew you were taking the wrong trajectory. So figuring out very early, okay, what are we supposed to do? How are we going to measure success? And how do we sort of implement the metrics and the checkpoints is something that we try and systematize. So that's one thing. The second is around sort of hiring. One of the major issues we face now is the talent is just not available. There are a bunch of companies which, we talked about it, have been funded. You have all those big companies, Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth, hiring in mass. You just don't find the talent. And people sometimes say, well, I can't find an A+ engineer, but I might be able to sort of hire that guy who seems to be sort of good enough or fair or whatever. And this is always, always, always a big mistake. You always need to hire top talent, and the talent in place want to hire smarter guys than the guys in place, and so on and so forth. Which means that you want to make sure that the core team you've assembled is able to do a lot around your product. So you want to make sure that the 2 or 3 guys you have in the engineering team will be able to do a bunch of code, bunch of the product development. Even if they were the only guys to sort of work for 18 months, you need to make sure that they can actually produce something which is meaningful.
I think also, I think it was Naval who wrote that blog post, but basically I think people might need to, they do need to rethink equity grants for the first, let's say, 3 or 4 people.
That's a great point.
Historically it would be post-financing, they'd get, half a point or whatever. And now I think Naval made this nice blog post about it, saying that, that from AngelList, he said, you should think of the first 3 to 4 as late co-founders.
Late co-founders, yeah, and I think it's a great point. I'm not sure I was in agreement with his sort of suggestions in terms of size of grants, but definitely your initial hires are sort of key, because they might be the only ones who have this equity incentive to really sort of stick around and work 80 hours a week and so on and so forth. So understanding that you live in an environment which is extremely constrained, and it's not because you have the money that you will be able to hire. It's just reality of the world we live in Silicon Valley, and from what I hear in New York as well.
Yeah.
It also has sort of led us to do sort of things which we used to avoid doing, like have sales, marketing, founder, in San Francisco, New York, and then development somewhere else. Like recently, we invested in Vidyard, a company based in Waterloo, Canada, first investment in Canada, and over there, you get top talent. Really good guys at a very reasonable salary. They don't get poached every second day by a big company, and the Canadian government is very generous with taxes, which means with tax breaks, which means that $1.5 million raised over there is the equivalent of $3 million raised here.
Oh.
So we sort of used to not look into those things, but because we like the company and the founder, and we looked at sort of the pluses, we said, well, what the hell, let's do that. We're in FanBridge together. They have part of the engineering in Argentina, and it works for them. It doesn't work for everyone, so you have to really, be careful in the way you set up remote, engineering and so on and so forth. But you have to do that in this environment to be competitive.
Yeah.
So figure out how you can sort of live in this environment of constraints and still, execute on that path, which will get you hopefully to the next round of financing.
Yeah, one of the sad things about our immigration policies, right, is that it forces FanBridge to do their development in Argentina when instead you could be creating jobs here. But
yeah, and we've been involved in trying to help start a visa, and we really badly need it, and it's just so sad.
Think about how many jobs. It's just amazing. Like Google created. One of them is I think it was Sergey Russian or whatever. But had they not come here, they went to the university, they started the company here. Now they've created 30,000, 40,000 jobs, whatever it is now. Yeah, and the economic impact of that. It's not criminal, but close. Not to sort of let that happen. It's kind of interesting that the UK government sort of learned about the startup visa concept when they visited the US, and in 9 months or less than 9 months, they actually passed the legislation. So startup visa exists in the UK. It does.
So. So we talked about the financing. We talked about figuring out where you are, sort of this focus around product. And the one thing which I really sort of saw happening with Fab and Jason Goldberg is this sort of myopical focus on providing value to your customers, to your users, and making sure that whatever happens, the experience is pleasing, and this is sort of on top of everything else. And whether it's in the website, whether it's the sign-up process, whether it's the checkout process, whether it's the open the box and the thing is broken process, it's really sort of having the organization pointed towards one thing, which is the value that we create is the customer experience. And so getting that culture is actually sort of easy amongst a small team of co-founders. But then, as you sort of layer more and more sort of team members, it's important to just remind people what they need to sort of keep an eye on and how they will eventually be measured. That typically happens when the company is successful and scales. And when it scales quickly, it's even sort of more of a challenge. We operate a lot under the life is too short sort of mantra, where if something is sort of too complex and something we just, we can't sort of figure it out in a reasonable sort of short amount of time, we basically pass on the opportunity, or we try and find sort of new ways of doing it. I've always found as an entrepreneur, sort of we're entrepreneurs ourselves, right? I mean, you are, because clearly you're a CEO, but I look at SoftTech as my own sort of startup. Having this and reminding yourself that, things need to be sort of simple, straightforward, and avoid complexity along the way is something that I wish more entrepreneurs were doing.